this is the second day of DevGam, and this is a second day with Fireside Chats. We have Simas of FunPlus today, and let's introduce Simas. Lera, what's the best way to introduce Simas? What do you say?
So I remembered from our small talk that he was struggling with coding for like long period of time for no reason. I don't understand still why. Why would you do that?
We can get to that.
And the second one, that you've been working in the company where it's like Awesome Blossom, Flower Power, and those like Candy Crush games.
The games that people actually play. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, it's very, very, very smart facts.
Speaking about smart facts, what's the smart way to introduce Simas?
Yeah, Simas is the head of operations at FunPlus. And he has a very rich background in game development. That's what I remember. And he has worked for many cool and big and small companies.
Yes. And also he likes music very much.
And creates music. And conducts music as a DJ.
Yes, Simas, and struggling with code.
And struggling with code. What's the part of yours as a person or as a professional that we haven't discussed and you are so proud of that you want that for people to know?
No, I think you guys did an excellent. So thanks for the intro. I guess you did a pretty good sum up. I really want to come back to the coding part because, like, after our last conversation, I really had to do some thinking as well, because like your question of like, what took you so long actually got me thinking, and I think I know the answer to that, but we can get back to that.
But one say right, so we invite you more. I can ask you this question once
again. It's like a therapist, like you came to us, we are like, what are you doing with your life?
Isn't everyone asking that question deeply inside?
We will get into the philosophy if we have time. Now it's time for questions. Who has a question for Simas?
Well, yes, me. I'm usually starting here with all the questions. Well, as far as I remember, the majority of your colleagues, Siemens, are in China. So I guess you started the changes like earlier than the rest of the companies in the world. And my first question is, how was your business strategy? How did it change in 2020?
Yeah, so I think I should start from saying that as a company, FunPlus, we have multiple offices and multiple studios in different parts of the world. The biggest one being in China, but we've recently, as of last year, opened a studio in Europe, in Stockholm. We have another studio in Moscow. So there, as you mentioned, yes, since China was sort of the first hit, or hardly hit with Corona pandemic, the hardest at the first big country to be hit by that. So a lot of changes started there. But the thing is that we're mostly witnessing what we're seeing is here in Stockholm, because I think the approach that Sweden has taken and the is radically different from the rest of the world. And then we as a studio have to take very different measures as well to make sure that we can keep everybody safe and make sure that we're also conducting our business as efficiently as possible. So that's a quick starting point. Whereas, like, I think the approaches that are being taken in China and the approaches that are being taken here in Stockholm are very different when it comes down to working. Also, the working sort of studio setup and working culture we have to tailor it to the talent we have and to the sort of cultures that they're coming from, and that's also differs quite a bit what we have in China and what we have here in Stockholm. So I would say, like, it's easier for me to talk about the Stockholm situation and how we changed our strategy around this. So I'll focus mostly on that. So what we did is, so first of all, maybe I started at FunPlus around like 7 months ago. So I started in April, where when things began to get really out of hand everywhere in the world. And my very first day at FunPlus was working from home, actually. So this is an interesting one, which was the first experience for me ever before starting at a new company, not in the team, but working from home, not being a freelancer, that is. So we at that time already we began as a studio thinking of what would be the different ways of conducting our business effectively, and then what we decided that we're going to follow first and foremost the government recommendations on how to deal with staff office operations and things like that. But in general, I think as a gaming industry, and especially for mobile games, it's it's a different story. Well, slightly different story for AAA games, but like for mobile games industry, we're slightly in a better position to deal with this because our teams are usually smaller. So it's easier to transition to different ways of working, either being like coming back together to the office to work together or moving other setups of the team. So I think for us, it was much easier to just make a decision that to move
How big is your team in
towards.
Stockholm?
It's not big actually. So there are two teams actually in Stockholm. They're working on slightly different things, but so the entire Stockholm studio is around 20 people right now, and it consists of two teams. So I would say one of the teams that I'm working with is around it's 10 people as of today. It's not big. It's not tiny, but it's definitely not big by any game development standards.
Do you want to boast that both teams are cherry picked and like hand picked, and all the people, like most of them, as I understand, you got them like from different studios all around and assembled one place? So sort of almost like a bunch of like good ex-colleagues or even friends working together. Or am I
So yeah, I would say that there's a lot of truth in that, or at least in the first part of what you just said. So it's definitely cherry picked, and also the team that I'm working with directly on day-to-day basis is not entirely based in Sweden or Stockholm alone. So we're my very direct team is working actually through three different time zones. Some of them being as far as 9 hours apart, and not to the China side, but to the other side. So it's so even not even being a part of the same company, but even being a part of the same team, we are sort of embracing the changing situation and building our new ways of working around that. Where it comes down to cherry picking the team, absolutely. I think every company should strive for that, because I'm a firm believer and always was a firm believer that a team makes or breaks a product. And when I say a team, I mean not specific individual, but the actual team, how they get together, because you might pick the best talent in the world and they might not stick together well. So I think it's as a leading a team, one of your first jobs is to actually make sure that you build a team that can deliver and work effectively together and is a good cultural fit together. And that will differ even in the same company or in the same location. That can differ based on like what kind of other personalities, what kind of other cultures do you have in your team. So yes, we did cherry pick the team a lot, and I think we're trying to get the best talent in the studio.
That's nice. So
So
yeah,
pretty much the team members are new to each other as well, right?
Partly, no, no, yes and no. Some of them are new to each other, but I think most of them have worked with each other at directly or just seen in each other. This is something that I guess a lot of even the big tech hubs or like big tech locations are sort of gossiping around. That basically is saying, oh, the industry is very small, and that you get to know a lot of people and you meet the same people a lot of times. So Stockholm's not immune to that. Most people you'll meet in the gaming industry or in the tech industry, they will have worked at some of the big companies like King or Dice or Spotify. Those are like really big tech and gaming companies that a lot of people will have on their resume because they employ a lot of people, and they mostly employ really great talent, and that's where that great talent just moves around and they meet each other. So
So
there's
how many people in your team have awesome blossom hoodie?
Flower power.
Or either awesome blossom or flower power. This is internal joke for blossom blast sign
I
game.
yeah, I think a good portion of it. So I would say like around at least 4 or 5 people have worked on that game, which is says to what Oleg said before, that it's much more, it's easier when you're working with hiring, right? Like you first and foremost, you want to hire the right person for the right job. And when you're choosing from different candidates, it's not that you want to surround yourself with the friends or colleagues you've worked with. I think that's not fully accurate. I think you're more evaluating different candidates. And in our scenario, it just happened. I think it's more of a consequence than anything else that it just happened that way. That we're surrounded by a lot of ex colleagues from working on different projects.
So, so I have a question. So, yeah, I was about to ask you how you're getting ready for year to 2021, because 2020 was a harsh year with the so random stuff happening around. So, what are you
Right.
expecting from 2021?
Yeah, a good question actually. So, um, so we're expecting to, grow a little bit in our team. That's first, like directly. If I'm thinking like industry wise, I want to come back a little bit to this year, and I think despite of all the horrible things that happen in the world, I do think there has been a lot of positivity and a lot of progress when it comes down to how we work and how people collaborate in the world. And I think this fact that we're different countries and different, like, big portions of population have been forced into outside of the office, that actually fast forwarded the progress and fast forwarded the necessary sort of processes that makes people realize that you don't necessarily need to be in the same location anymore, right? Or you don't need to physically be in the same office
Mm.
anymore. Which, of course, a lot of people who have been freelancing for a long time, they'll be like, "Yeah, come on, we knew this, like 15 years ago," and that's true. But I think big companies, and especially certain industries that have been very even proud, I would say, from the fact that their synergies are coming from the fact that everyone's like physically located in the same area where you can come and just ping your colleague and share ideas. I think this year has proven that it's possible to actually move that online setup as well to an effective online setup. And for us, it was definitely a journey that we discovered as well, that it actually works. And the setup we've chosen for our studio as of today is actually that work at the office is optional. Basically, you will have a place in the office. Like if you want to come to the office, well, at this very second, no, because of regulations and recommendations by the Swedish government. But the idea long term is that office is a place where it's optional for you. If you want to come to the office, great. Please come here. You'll have your desk, either your own desk, or we'll have, depending on the size of the studio, we will probably have hot desks for people to just come in and to do their work. Um, the idea is that as a studio, we want to provide really flexible and comfortable working environment for people at home. So we offer like separate budget for them to set up their home office. Like we help with the furniture, make sure everything is basically comfortable, and you can conduct your work at the comfort of the home if you choose so, right? But yet again, if you choose to work from the office, and that's better for you because, I don't know, you have kids running around and not allowing you to focus, if that's a thing, then you can definitely to the office and work from
Or
there.
a cat.
So that's sort of the biggest change, I think, for us as a studio. And I know a lot of other studios have been going through similar process as well, which right now sounds straightforward, but the devil is always in the details. And how do you actually set it up effectively? How do you make people not feel alone, but how do you make them feel they're still connected? They're still part of the same team. They're not
Yes,
just
how?
individuals contributing
Yeah,
to
I
the
was
thing.
exactly
How? I mean,
about to ask.
do you have a special process? Like, is it a process? Is it a tool? Is it a combination? Like, if you were to advise like one thing, since I mean, you're scattered around the world, both physically and also like culturally, right? Because like
Yeah.
the bosses are sort of both hours away and also cultures away, and it's all remote, and you cannot get together and get drunk and sort of you know
You can
network.
get drunk in Zoom call. It's fine.
And
And
then
we,
people are
by the
traveling
way,
out of the big cities as well, so that might be a problem as well.
yeah. Well, one thing that actually, so what we said is, um, part of our setup is what we said. We established available hours. So what we said, like that, basically, based on your current setup, like you can, as a team member, you can work, like you can select hours you're working at, but like there are certain hours, like a certain time during the day where you're supposed to be available. That means if your colleagues would like to ask you something, or just be available to other team members. And outside of that, like people are free to sort of set up their working schedule to make sure they deliver on what we agree as a team. But coming back to the question of how do we, to Oleg, to your question, you can't come together and get, grab drinks or things like that. We actually do quite a lot of like hangouts. So in Sweden, we have this culture of fika. So
Oh,
basically, where, at a certain time of the day, everyone would meet, grab some cake, grab some coffee, tea, whatever, or whatever is your drink. We do that, but we do that through a Slack call. So everyone just jumps in, puts their camera on, grabs their coffees, grabs their whatever snacks they have, and we just hang out. We do the same for, like, we do some Friday hangouts as well, where everyone just joins in. We would maybe throw in, like last Friday, for example, we just threw in like a Jackbox TV, everyone just playing on that while we're sort of streaming it on a call.
yes,
Sorry.
you can. That's a great solution. I'm saying that's amazing. Like,
That's a very
Yeah.
sad solution. It's
I
called
know, I like it
2020
like
Well, but
solution 2020.
what
you
can
don't
what
need to
can
go out. Like,
it's one thing that actually I've noticed personally, that this whole working from home setup like exacerbated a lot, is sort of the polarization for people's preferences, right? Like some people have become much more vocal about the fact that they actually really don't like working from the office because for them it's noisy, it's distracting. And another group of people were beginning to get much more vocal about the fact that they actually are missing that. So it's so we have to work with both of these kind of worlds. Wait, are you the first part or the second?
I want to go to the office and hug everybody I see. I mean, I haven't hugged people at mass for a while as
Right,
well. So
and then I'm
right.
second one because like I don't want to. I'm
to
fine
get
sitting at
hugged,
home. Fine sitting at
For me
home.
personally, it changed. It changed because I used to be a person where I used to, like, long time ago, I used to work a lot from home, and it maybe didn't work out that well. Then I was a really big fan of actually coming to the office. But then when you are in a really big office, and I want to say like a really big office that's having a few hundred people in the same open space, it just becomes taxing on you, like mentally, right? Like it becomes like you'll need to find your own like routines to get focused, especially when you need focused work done, someone not to interrupt you with things. So like recently I actually found that for me working from home, especially when I need to get focus work done, it's perfect setup when it comes to that.
you don't have office politics at home. You have home politics. Like you have to deal with your pet.
Yeah, home politics. That's right. But then also, like one thing that we've used quite a bit in the studio during the summer when the rules were a bit, or at least rules in Sweden were a bit less strict than they are right now, we would use the office more strategically. We would basically say, like, if there are things that we cannot, figure out, or like over Slack calls, or seeing that it's slow, things are moving slowly, then we would just say, like, okay, let's everyone get masks and let's meet up in the office actually physically, and try to make a meeting in the office, so more of a strategic meeting place in the office, and that actually worked brilliantly. And of course, some things that people lacked were like whiteboards and stuff like that, where you can just model. But now there's like plenty great online tools. We're using Miro a lot, which I think is like an excellent tool for any whiteboarding. Big,
That's a great
yeah,
one.
yeah. So we use that really a lot, and then I would say too much, because people get trigger happy, like, oh, I have all this board space and I can create all of these amazing boards, and then you have a lot of boards.
Lots of boards, lots of stuff on the board, and no work done. Look, but the board is so beautiful.
What do you mean? No, I think this is the luxury you have in a great team, where everyone's like very engaged, where people are actually asking themselves the question, like, is this really the right thing I should be focusing on, and is this worthwhile doing? And if the answer is yes, then go ahead. They're gonna go and do that board that's gonna help the rest of the team. If not, then probably they're not gonna bother.
One
Up to
last
you.
question. So what are you most excited right now to talk about? Like the most excited thing out of all
Right.
this conversation?
There's a lot of things actually I'm excited about, but I think, like, in the spirit of sticking to the sort of the topic of the conversation and how things are set up, like around the office, like one piece of thing that has been became evident throughout this year, specifically, I don't know, maybe it's a Swedish problem, maybe it has to do a lot with like legislation and local governments actually, and how do we attract talent to the company without without physically relocating them? I think that's a uh, big topic for us, at least, because of course, if people are willing to relocate, we will do everything we can. But the thing is, we've because of working remotely, we've realized that it's not entirely necessary, especially if people are not willing to relocate. We can still leverage their talent. Unfortunately, a lot of governments are actually not ready for like full legislation for that, to make sure how the taxation works, and how do people make sure they get all the benefits of being employed in one country, but also like getting all the benefits of staying in their own country, and how do we sort of handle with that? So what I'm really hopeful actually is for maybe next year or within the coming years, for governments to push much more legislation that would support this type of working, both for the employers but also like for the employees to be able to join and work at companies remotely without being freelancers.
There is a question I've been thinking about, Simas. Maybe you can relate to that too. But as a head of operations at the big studio, do you have this question when some people they're working from big cities, right? And during pandemic, a lot of people are leaving those big cities, but the salaries that they're receiving in big cities are tightly aligned to that big cities. And I mean, there is such a thing as a difference between the salaries of people working outside of big cities but doing the same job, and people who just left the big city and living in the same city but getting the salary, the previous salary. So there is like a major question of how to address that, and nobody knows, right? And there is a huge question. Maybe you have something, I don't know, in your mind, how people can relate to that, or if that's even a question.
I think the question is depends. I would say it depends, right? Probably that's the answer for everything. So I can share the strategy we're taking for this. So we don't discriminate on the location. So basically, it doesn't matter if you're working in Stockholm or if you're working from your cabin in up north.
Hmm.
We have people working, like one person is actually working from Buenos Aires. So like we have different locations, right? And even though there is absolutely a disparity from different like in the big cities or like whichever country you are, there will be disparities when it comes down to salaries. But I think one way of like mitigating that, at least partly, is actually uh, not having salary ranges, but rather
Right.
compensating people based directly on their merit, and basically trying to be as, you know, as honest as you can with the person, of compensating them to basically to the degree of what kind of value they're delivering.
Totally makes sense for me. But
I have a question. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really
Yeah,
wondering.
go ahead.
It's still about the coding. You didn't answer it.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Why?
So I actually realized that it wasn't. I didn't struggle with it for that long. Actually, I was probably okay for the first for a time. I was probably quite okay with that. It was a learning experience, definitely. Well, first of all, working having the first tech job, you learn a lot about the industry. Even though it wasn't the games tech, it was more like a corporate software type of job. You learn a lot of how things work, of how to even work in a workplace to begin with. So, but also like I did not despise the job actually that much. It was just I think after a while, it switched from being, oh, I'm working in a tech industry, switched to more like, nah, okay, it's just a job. And then you sort of then you don't think about it. You just do it, and it's just a job for you uh, to get money, and for you to go about with the rest of your life, and then you can focus there. But then at a certain point, and that was like definitely closer to the end of what I mentioned, as was like a, a long time working in that job. I think it was like closer to the very end of it where I actually started getting frustrated about it. And then I started evaluating, right, okay, is this the right thing for me? Is this really what I enjoy doing? And I just decided no. And I think the moment I did decide when it's no, then that's when I made the move.
Okay.
So it's like, to answer your question directly, it wasn't that I struggled from day one with writing code, or like not struggle, but rather didn't enjoy writing code from day one. It's I think I did. I think it was just like after a long time it changed because my life changed. My like what I value changes as well. Like you grow and you learn. So I think that's the process. I think if
I
I
can
did,
relate to it.
I think if I didn't like it from the very beginning, which a lot of people will, try out different jobs and see what's right for them. I think if it would be the scenario that it was not a completely wrong fit, then probably I would have tried something else.
Yeah, lucky people who know from the very beginning what they love to do,
I
right?
agree.
Because otherwise you have to try all the time, and this is the only way. And I mean, for majority of people, I think this is the only way to actually
And
realize.
especially it has to do a lot with your upbringing as well, right? Different cultures upbring their children very differently. I was brought in a culture where it was sort of, you know, you go to school, finish your high school, then immediately to university. That means like you need to know what you're going to study before even trying out the job, which is like when I think about it right now, it's crazy, right?
Mhm.
Like I would
Yeah.
personally not could not recommend that to anyone personally,
Yeah,
right?
you're
Like
like
jumping
just a
straight,
teenager and you don't know
like
who you
you
are
don't even know exactly. So
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 like
jumping into the deep end of jobs, like I know a lot of people join the tech or like learning computer science and things like that for the fact that it opens up for a lot of job opportunities and interesting job opportunities, which is I think is very true. But the question if they're going to enjoy that, like they won't know that until they try that out. And in the case of a lot of tech studies, it's going to take you at least 1 or 2 years of your studies to begin with before you'll even have a chance for an internship or something like that. So
yeah,
yeah, like
are just big scam. In my opinion.
sorry.
The universities are just a big scam in my opinion, like for the first few years they're teaching you something random. They're like, oh yeah, here you go,
But
random
I think
philosophy,
it's changing.
psychology. No, still no.
I think it's like it depends, of course, on the universities, but I see a lot of schools begin to accept a lot of guidance from the business, and I think that's very important for schools to reflect to the needs of the business. If universities and schools, or like I don't know, colleges, if they have the ambition for their graduates to not continue in the path of science and sort of like the research, if the goal is for them to, at least a big portion of their graduates, to go into the workforce, then they definitely need to listen to the industry and need to listen like what are the needs. And I think schools have been doing that more and more. The question is it too slow? Maybe. um, but I think it's not standing still. And to your point, where you said if you learn computer science, there's a lot of math, and there's a lot of like all other things that you'll say like, oh, I won't need this calculus ever in my life,
No,
right?
I mean like for the first year they usually put those random subjects like philosophy, psychology, and you cannot go deeply into your like major. So you're like for the first year or something, you're like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm doing. Like, am I doing right or wrong? And then like in the end of
Right.
university, you're like, oh, okay, I don't like
That's
it.
what it all was about, right?
You're like,
But I think
oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, I think it's a lot to do with the fact that a lot of like there's at least in Lithuania where I'm from, there's a big stigma on college education compared to university education, right? And I think in a lot of countries there is a big differentiation on what's the actual purpose of going to college versus going to university. And whereas universities usually try to market themselves as like, we're actually building a much broader profile. We're not building an employee, but rather growing somebody's character, broadening their worldview, which is, I
Networking.
think, networking, of course. But like, I understand why they do that, why they add these kind of subjects, because I think it is important for that type of broadening your worldview. But as you say, it does not maybe directly add, computational power to your job sort of skill, but then again, maybe university is not the right choice. Maybe then you need to go to a college which mostly focuses on skills, and then maybe you don't need to spend 3.5 years or 3 years in university, and can do that, learn to code in like 1.5 years in a college instead. So
I was
it's
about
I
to
think
ask
it's
you, like, as a hiring manager, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, as a hiring manager, do you pay attention at all to one's education? Like, if he graduated or she graduated from college, university, what college, university, like grades and stuff like this. Do you pay attention to that all in all? Or maybe for
um,
some positions
much
only?
much less than the students coming directly from universities would want, I would say.
Okay.
The number one, like when hiring someone, of course, it depends on the position, but I can use a developer as an example for that. The first thing you're gonna look into is their current and latest job experience. So basically, if this is not their first job, right, you're mostly interested about the professional experience they had outside of academic experiences, and you start evaluating from there. And of course, university can come into play, especially if this is your very first job and you don't have professional experiences. Then, of course, you would look into that. I don't know anyone who has actually looked into the grades. Quite frankly, I've
Mom?
never did because to me personally, and maybe this is my part of my personal philosophy, is university is not about the grades, right? This is like what you learn from it. And some people can just be bad at testing, right? And then they might fail the grades. They might have a bad relationship with the
Yeah.
university professor. There's a lot of nuances at play. I think key is not only knowledge that they have, but it's part of the key, but I think like it's their ability to leverage that knowledge into something useful for the business. And I think that's like, as a person working with hiring people, that's the kind of a thing you're trying to evaluate as one part of it, right? Even a bigger important part is a cultural fit for the team.
Right. Right.
So, shall we release Simas and let him get some work done, actually? or I mean, I enjoy hanging out with him as well. I mean, and like when
We have more questions.
well, obviously,
No, I'm kidding.
send Simas virtual hugs. I think like the chemistry and the vibe here has been actually amazing, and yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
a
you so
lot,
much,
guys, for
Simas.
the opportunity. It was my pleasure, actually.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Also, you two can envy me since I actually can go and hang out with Simas and you cannot. So
Don't be that person.
We
but
get
then
used to him like that, so it's fine.
I mean, there are less and less reasons for them to hate me, so I'm just keep bringing in more. So good. Thank you, Simas, a lot,
Thank
and
you.
Thanks,
hope you have
guys.
the best day ever. Goodbye.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thanks, guys. Talk
Bye.
later. It's good kind of advertisement, right?
Šikšnosparnis.
Right, that's a good start.
I tend to remember you learned all the words that have an F in it.
I know.
Well, yesterday she impressed the Swedish guy with a word. Go for it.
Hölpador.
Right, not
I don't even know
one.
what that means. What is
Hölpadda. That's Lucas.
Okay.
I'm learning
Now I know.
only the most useful.
Now I know.
So smart, so smart.
Oh, we all know it's not about that. It's all about like getting the right words for the conversation starters, right?
Yeah.
But like, why? Yeah.
Why? Well, you know that now we're talking about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't. So
Yeah.
that's the whole
Well,
point.
I'm not sure that helps any business related. But maybe it helps. I mean, what
Come
do I
on,
know?
like all business
helps.
is like it's never a company. Like dealing with company. It's a person dealing with person, whichever business is going on. So it's like
It's a person dealing with Hölpadda.
Šlapdriba.
Šlapdriba, right.
yeah, that's
So,
coming soon.
Yeah, šlapdriba. That's the kind of weather that is common in Lithuania. So that's
It's
also very
always,
important.
it's always there, as far as I
What
remember.
kind of weather is that? Like
It's
raining?
like
National weather.
Raining and snow at the same time.
Ah,
You know
yeah. I know the feeling.
It was always in Lithuania.